First of all, I would like to thank Aware for giving me the opportunity to talk to this audience. When I was talking to Shirley before coming here, I thought it would be a great opportunity where I can access the experiences of the people who actually suffer from illnesses or who have a first-hand knowledge of these illnesses, because they would have seen either their loved ones suffering from some of the illnesses, or would have seen the impact of these problems on their day-to-day living. I'm not going to claim I'm the expert of this field. I'm learning, I'm working on this field. I would like to share my experiences with your experiences. And I would like this lecture should not be a lecture, but an interactive process where when I go back, I learn something from you guys, and vice versa as well. I've tried to make the lecture as simple as possible, but if at any stage you feel something is not understandable, don't hesitate to stop me and ask me. So in the first part of the lecture, I would talk about why the cognitive dysfunction has been not looked at for a long period, even though there has been there in all form of mental illnesses, and why it's important now that we should look into them, because they have a huge impact on people's personal, social, and occupational spheres of life. I'm going to talk about few tests, simple tests, how you test these problems. I'm not going to focus much on medication. I'm going to focus more on psychological intervention, which may help in helping individuals with this cognitive dysfunctions. So in my 23 years of practice, I would have always listened. A child coming from school having a problem with, I cannot attain what the teacher was saying, or would not be able to memorize things because he cannot focus on things. A housewife forgets, she has to collect her child at 3 o'clock, or she might forget her oven open for a long period. Similarly, people having difficulty in doing problem solving. Issues like financial problem solving, issues about relational problems, they have always been as a part of the mental illness or psychological issues. But not much work has been done on this area, and there has been very little psychological intervention available till maybe I would say 5 to 10 years. So it's important to understand that this problem is there. The key thing is to focus on them. Now the question is why didn't people felt that this is an important part of the illness? There were a lot of misconception. People thought that the cognition is not a part of depression. They thought it's part of either schizophrenia or cognitive disorders like organic brain disorders or dementia. They thought depression and the bipolars were just problems with the mood and has nothing to do with cognition. People have these misconceptions that maybe neuropsychology testing would take long. Then there was question of treatment as well. People thought probably the medication they were taking for depression is going to treat their cognitive dysfunction as well. And then there was misconception that the pseudodementia, this is the memory difficulties happening along with the mood disorders. So they thought that it remits by itself by getting treatment for depression. So now question is why we should explore it. We have recognized that these cognitive dysfunctions has a huge impact on people's personal life, their employment, their general health. And this cost is not only to the individuals, but to the family, to the nation, to the society as a whole. We have also found that these neurocognition deficits have a huge impact on your functional outcome. The way you perform in your personal, social, and occupational life is entirely dependent on your cognitions as well. So if there would be deficit in cognition, you're going to definitely have a functional impairment. In the recent past, neuroimaging is like CT scans, MRIs, functional MRIs. They have shown that there are changes in structurally, functionally in the brain while people are depressed. And these might be the reason why people get these cognitive deficits. And then there was final realization that pseudodementia doesn't go away. The memory deficit, along with depression, tends to continue unless you treat them specifically. The first thing I would like to explain is what is cognition. Cognitions are basically mental processes which we have in order to make sense of our world. We see a thing, we have a perception, we try to focus on it, then we try to remember it, then we try to put it in our working memory and in long-term memory. And the final process is if we need that information, we retrieve that information. So this is a thread of processes happening for any sort of cognitive functioning, any sort of day-to-day functioning. In depression, there are two types of cognitive difficulties. One is hot biases. I'm calling it hot not because it's hot, it's because it's very obvious to people. Everybody who knows somebody suffering from depression or person suffering from depression, he would be very cognizant of these hot biases. And these hot biases, like people would have negative perceptions about themselves, negative perception about future or the world in general. So we call it negative emotion-dependent biases. So people are very pessimistic about things. And that affects their day-to-day functioning. They have a very they overreact to negative feedbacks. They're very sensitive. If people say something, they may misinterpret it in a different way. And then our perception as well as our memory generally tend to focus on these negative cues. So it may not be real, but we may still have this self-focused rumination where we say, I'm no good, I can't even do this thing. So these hot biases has been there and has been very obvious both to the patient, their carers, and the medical care workers as well. But the other bit of cognitions which nobody attended to were what we call cold deficits. I'm calling it cold not because it's cold, because they're not so obvious as compared to hot biases like pessimism. So these means attention. In order to remember anything, we have to sustain focus on a particular thing. And we have to exclude distractions around us in order to really sort of pick it up. Then we should have a cognitive flexibility between different tasks. On a normal day, you may be dealing with 20 things at a time, or successively or at the same time. Then executive functions. These are the processes in our head, in our mind, which are dealing with problem solving, planning. If I have to go apply for a job, how should I plan? What is needed for that planning? And then the working memory. And then the other type of memory is called semantic memory. This is a memory about facts. Facts like who's the president of Ireland, or how does certain things work, how does a washing machine works. These are factual information which we need to gain in order to function with day-to-day work. And then finally the episodic memory. Things like what I did yesterday, what did I eat, did I pay my fees for my child? All these things are episodic memory. So when you're suffering from mental illnesses, all these areas are affected and they affect each part of your life. A perfectly functioning wife would find it difficult to cope with day-to-day work. Daily chores would become so difficult. An intelligent, competent person might start having difficulties in an employment, even though his depression is lifted. But still he's having difficulties, and he may have difficulty with his bosses. So all these deficits play a major role in final recovery. So I'm going to focus today more on the cold deficits rather than the hot deficits, because hot deficits, usually CBT, most people know about CBT, most people would have heard about it. A lot of these hot biases go away quite easily with antidepressant and psychological therapies like cognitive behavior therapy. Today I'm going to focus on the cold deficits. So as I said, cognitions are the mental processes that are involved in acquisition. That's what you do. You acquire a knowledge, then you process it in your brain and then store it somewhere so that you're going to use it somewhere in the future in order to deal with a particular problem. So if you're going to have problem in, number one, attending to a thing, or acquiring that information, or processing in your brain, you're definitely going to have problem when you're working with some problem. So there has been a lot of research done in all type of mental illness, and they have found deficits in every aspect of cognition, whether it's your attention, your learning, short-term memory, working memory, even verbal ability. People who were very verbal in social situations find it difficult to talk to people. They would say, oh, I don't know how to talk in this social situation now. Visual spatial skills. These are the skills you use, let's say, to find your way around. If you have to go from one place to another, you need to access that old memory of your way around and do that journey. So if there are deficits in it, you're going to find it difficult to find places. And then, logic, reasoning, problem solving, each aspect of cognition is affected by these things. Now this slide shows every disorder, whether it's major depression, bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, general anxiety disorder, Alzheimer's. In every illness, there are deficits in all areas of cognitions. Depression in the past, people thought there were no cognitive dysfunctions, though in the last 10 years there is a lot of research done in this area. People have found that cognitive dysfunction is an important part of every episode of depression. So this study by Lee et al., he found that in first episode major depressive disorder as compared to the controls who didn't have depression, there were significant cognitive dysfunction in all areas of cognitions, including working memory, verbal learning, cognitive flexibility, verbal fluency, task switching. And this was not limited to just during the episode. Even people who responded to medication, even then, were shown to be still having cognitive dysfunction, even though their hot biases, their pessimistic thinking has improved, but they are still showing deficits in their cognitive functioning, especially executive functioning and attention. In another study, it was shown that as we progress, people suffering from recurrent depressive disorder, as they have more and more depressive episodes, their memory function decline with every increasing number of the episode. Approximately by every episode, there was a decline of 2 to 3% as in case of recall capacities. So we have found that it's an important part of all mental illnesses. It's extremely important that we need to look into it, try to assess it, and then find a way to help it out. In the past, people thought, we have to go through psychological tests, psychology is rare, it's difficult to get an appointment. But in the recent past, there has been a lot of very simple tests, which can show significant changes, even minor changes in your cognitive dysfunction. And then you can plan a cognitive remediation plan according to those tests. So one thing is subjective. So when people access psychiatry, psychology, or other healthcare worker, they should be asked about these cognitive changes. A lot of time you would see the doctors, nurses, psychologists, they're focusing on hot biases, pessimistic. They really ask you about attention, they really ask you about day-to-day functioning. So people working in healthcare, especially psychiatry, needs to start asking questions about these things. Now, we're just going to do a small game here. I would like people a word would appear here. I don't want you to say what the word is. I would just like you to think what's the color of the word and see how quickly you can do it. So, was there an oops effect? So you can see even whether you feel you're fine, but at times your attention is not so good. Now this is called a Stroop test. It's a very simple test, and it's going to check your selective attention. Very simple. And it could be done in 2 minutes. Now, this is called NBAC test. This is about your working memory. Okay? I would like you to, just remember when a word happens again after the 2 numbers. So you have to press it's a computer thing, or you can do it otherwise. You press it if it is repeated after 2 words, 2 boxes. So that's checking your working memory, So you're reading 6, 7, 3, 7, so it's repeating. So that's going to check your working memory. So it normally activates certain areas of brain which are related to working memory. Now this is called Wilkinson card sort. So in the first figure, I would like you to, check 3 similar things, either by color, number, or shape. So here, there are 3 in number. So people are asked to make a circle around either 3 colors, 3 numbers, or 3 shapes. So it's the speed with which you do that is checked. And this is for reasoning and conceptual flexibility, how quickly you can move from one set of cards to another, and different colors, different numbers, different shapes. And it has been found to be effective in most psychiatric disorders as well, especially depression. I would like you to read and see whether anybody said something that shouldn't have been said or something awkward, quickly. So, something wrong said by somebody? Anybody? She shouldn't have told. Yeah. So this is about social perception. Read this para and try, what does Jane want from her dad to do? So, simple, very simple. Jane wants something from her dad for a birthday present. So what I'm trying to get at is these tests are very simple, and it's going to test certain cognitive deficits. A lot of people don't realize that those are happening unless you get proper testing. And these tests are not complicated. They're very simple tests, What is this? Guess? What is this? Yeah, that's pretty good. So that's really good. So perceiving fragment as part of the whole, and in a lot of schizophrenia patients, this is disturbed. So you can see that they're very simple testing. So rationale for testing cognitive functions. If the cognitive dysfunctions are present, it's going to affect your function, day-to-day function, whether it's your personal life, social life, or occupational sphere. It is definitely going to be affected. These deficits may persist beyond symptom response. So even though you go to a psychiatrist or a psychologist, get your treatment, improve in your hot biases, you're very more optimistic, but you might still be having difficulties in paying bills, remembering things, sorting out your financial affairs, dealing with your kids. So that has to be looked at. It results in difficulties returning to work. People respond to medication, people respond to psychotherapy, but they still not be able to be fully functional in their workplace. And now, recently, it has been found in all the twin studies that, even though they did a study in Denmark where, they compared the twins in which one of the twin had the depression, and they looked for cognitive deficits in the other twin. They should be identical. So they found that even though the other person was not suffering from depression, he would still have cognitive deficits. So it means there are certain biomarkers or genetic predisposition when you're having these psychological issues that cognitive dysfunctions are part of that problem, but which has not been looked after up till now. And now there are structural and functional new tests which have been used to check all these things. I'm not going to talk much about antidepressant effects. There certain differences has been found in different antidepressants in terms of cognitive dysfunctions. So therapeutic strategies which has been used up till now to treat cognitions. There has been studies where CBT has been used. It has been found to be the upright arrow means improvement, downward arrow means worsening, plus minus means no marked change. So CBT has had effect on the emotional symptoms, what I call the hot bias, pessimism, negative self-perceptions, but it had little or no effect on the cognitive impairment. Cognitive remediation therapy, this is a new type of therapy. It doesn't have much effect on emotional symptoms, but it has definitely found to be effective in the cognitive impairment. Then ECT, emotional symptoms, great. On the cognitive part, sometimes it makes it worse. Then this is repeated TMS. I think there are only 1 or 2 machines now in Ireland, but it's widely used in USA. It has been to be found effective emotional symptoms, very little or no change at all on the cognitive deficits. And then there's talk about pharmacotherapy. There are certain researches that certain medications work better than others. But my focus of lecture today is more towards cognitive remediation therapy. But if somebody wants to ask questions about medication, I'll be more than happy to answer those questions. So how come CRT? CRT is cognitive remediation therapy. How did it come about? Where did people got the idea from? People observed in experimental psychology that they did experiment with mice, and they found that the mice who were kept in deprived environment had more sort of less able to solve problems or escape from different things than the one who were kept in enriched environment. And they found, they did testing on the brain as well, that there were neurons is a brain cells. They found greater proliferation of neuronal cells in the mice who had an enriched. That means they were constantly occupied in doing different stuff, as you can see. In a study, Pascal Leon found that as they found when the physical activity is done, there was more activity in the motor cortex of the brain. But they also found that when more mental practice was there, the areas of the brain which are concerned with cognitions showed marked increase in functional activity. That means the more brain you use, the better it gets at it, certain things, at cognitions. So that's the concept of plasticity. This is a very interesting study. This was done in London, and they found that the London taxi driver had a slightly larger hippocampi. This is a part of the brain who has a lot to do with cognitions. And they found their hippocampi were much bigger than the controls, because they're constantly doing this visual-spatial practice, how I get from here to there and here to there. This is a very interesting slide. This is about people in schizophrenia who suffer from cognitive deficits. And these are the different tablets which has been used. And that shows 0.4, 0.2. These are the effect sizes shown by different medication on the cognitive deficits. Now, the surprising thing is this. Practice effect is the biggest of all. So the more you use the brain, the better you get at it. So they found that the cognitive remediation has a huge impact on your cognitive functions, improving the cognitive. So what is CRT? CRT has been used in the past in acquired brain injuries, has been used in dementia in the past. It has been used in depressive disorder, anorexia, and other conditions. It works on the processes rather than the content. Like CBT, you work on the content. You talk about thought modification. But in CRT, it's on the processes. Processes like attention, perceptions, how the memory works, how do you acquire information, how do you store it, how do you use that information for problem solving. So they thought that if you're going to work on all these processes, that's going to improve your day-to-day functioning, because your cognition is going to improve, and those improvement in cognitions can help you in functioning better in your personal, social, and occupational spheres of life. So it involves patient in fun and stimulating activities. So without having the distress of focusing on pessimism, negative thinking, and all those things. It doesn't say that you can't you don't do CBT. It says, yeah, you can do CBT about the hot bias, but hot bias is not very effective in the cold bias. So you need to do something more than that. So you involve patients in fun and stimulating activities, and that has been found to be very helpful in all these conditions. As I said, it has been used in schizophrenia, acquired brain injury. What you do is you help patient to assess their cognitive style, the way they function in day-to-day activity. You use certain tests to find specific deficits in the cognition, whether the deficit is in attention or acquiring information, storing information, or whether there's problem with the cognitive flexibility. So through testing, you find individual problems in individual patients. And then you devise plans which patient has to follow through different ways to improve certain areas of their brain, improving the plasticity, as I gave example of taxi drivers and all those things. So it can be applied in a number of contexts: single, individual work, family work, group work. It can start. We started with all other type of therapies: CBT, medication, other types of therapies. So what you do is you screen the patient for deficit, find the target problem, devise a plan, and keep on assessing the patient according to the improvement or difficulties. You adopt the exercises to help target areas that seems problematic. Primarily, they have divided into 4 domains where people can have deficits in terms of cognitions. People can have difficulty in cognitive flexibility. It's called set shifting. I'm going to talk as each one by one. And I'm going to explain how does it affects your day-to-day functioning as well. So set shifting. So people are asked to find similarities or differences between figures, words, and to verbalize it. And it's gradually they're given practice about it. And gradually they find that their set shifting improves. So people can, at the same time, do a couple of things at the same time. So improving their focus, their attention. And as I said, attention is the key to rest of the functioning. This is also another, it's called up and down. It's monkeys climbing the tree in different directions. So people have to follow. This is only a small part of the whole thing. There are bigger figures. So you have to follow different directions. Then this is another one. What can you see? So one person can see a flask there, other person can see 2 faces. So it helps. There are a number of other diagrams. And this is a game. There's a site as well, thinkfun.com. People can go and see it. It's like Scrabble. Scrabble. So instead of words, there are figures, different colors, and you have to make rows. So it helps you shift, let's say, from color to shapes to numbers. You do different games, And this all improves your set shifting, improves your attention. So your focus improves. There's another one. Wrong names are given to different things, and you have to quickly shift names to the appropriate figure. in day-to-day practice, you need attention. You need to focus your attention and remove the distraction. So if you're going to practice that focus and attention, that's going to improve your ability to perceive and acquire information. Central coherence, normally we get a lot of information from different sources. Our brain then sort of look into different information and use that same information to do a certain task. So it's give you practice in terms of, it's called central coherence task. So what you do is there are different figures and people are asked geometric figures and they get more complicated as they go by. You use simpler figures with the younger children and complicated one with the adults. Like for example, this one. So people are asked how many geometric figures you can get out of that, or people are given certain geometric figures and asked to arrange them in a fashion whereby it makes this picture. So you're using different information to put things together. The next is summarizing. So you're using different information, understanding it, and then you're summarizing it. So it's getting more complicated. So first thing is attention. You're going to attention on a story. Then you're going to achieve certain information from it. Then you're going to process this in your brain. And then you're going to summarize it. So it means it goes through the whole process of the cognition. Now, the other domain is visuospatial memory task. As I said, simple example would be if I'm going to ask, you're here in St. Patrick's, how are you going to go to St. John of God's? Make a path to St. John of God, driving. So that's going to use your visuospatial thing. So there are a lot of things you can use. I will go by one. So this is memorize and recall, 1 to 4. So you're going to show a page to them and then ask them, what did you see afterwards without showing that page? Hidden object game, a very simple one. We do it a lot with the young children. You can do it with older people, making it more complicated as well. You take a number of simple day-to-day things, put it under a cloth or something. First, ask them to remember. Let's say you start off with 4 objects. You keep on increasing the number of objects. And then you give them, then you keep on distracting them by talking to them. And after a couple of minutes or after 30 seconds, after somewhere 2 to 3 minutes, you ask them, can you tell you back what were those things? Finding your way. This is a maze. You would have done maze in the newspaper. Let's also check your visuospatial. The map game. Now it's getting complicated. So people are given a map, and they're asked, okay, this is a map of Dublin. So how are you going to plan your detour from, let's say, Dublin 15 to city centre? Something like that. So people read that map, they think about that, so and then they're going to come up with a plan. These are 2 games. You can see it on thinkfun.com, shape by shape, square by square. Very good games, simple enough, but it's gonna test your visual spatial skills. Planning task. So the first is prioritizing and planning. So very simple. It all depends on who are you doing with. With children, it's different. With an adult, it would be different. Very simple. You give homework. What steps do you need to take, for example, to apply for a job? Or go to a football game, go to a hairdresser, write a book report. So you adjust the complexity of the problem according to individual. Photo sequencing. So you give different photos and you say, where do they go? So there's an individual going somewhere, but they are all the pictures are haphazard. So they're going to create a sequence in it. Planning tasks, the rush hour, serpentile. Rush hour, it's a game, traffic jam, and then you have to find your way to get out of the traffic jam. That's also available on thinkfun.com. And it also tests your visual spatial ability. And by practicing again and again and again, you're improving your plasticity of your brain. Finally, homework is very important. Whatever you achieve in the sessions, you're going to give homework, and depending on individuals, what sort of areas they have deficits in, you're going to create a homework according to that. And it can be as simple as writing birthday invitation to more complicated, like watching a movie and then discussing a plot with somebody. Okay. So this is not exhaustive. It's a very big sort of area which we are working on, and it's in a continuous development, but it has shown significant impact on cognitive functions. It has two effects. One is when people understand that they can do stuff, it gives them a great confidence. What happens in depression? People become depressed, they lose interest, they develop anhedonia, no pleasure out of things. They stop doing it. And they lose skill of living. Life is a skill. Day-to-day living is nothing but a skill. Relationship are skills. So when you get depressed, you get just withdraw from everybody. So you started to get less competent at it, and that's a huge blow to your self-esteem. And then it's a vicious cycle. You lose your self-esteem, then you become afraid of doing stuff. That means you're doing less practice. So the more you do, you become more confident. And if we talked about plasticity, the more you do, the better you get at it. Okay, there are certain principles of cognitive remediation. Number one is it should be progressive and bottom-up. So if you are dealing with memory problems, start with the attention first rather than going straight away to the memory. Start with simpler tasks rather than the complicated one. You have to build it up. So, number one, progressive and bottom-up. Number two is repetition and practice. More the neurons fire together, the more they wire together. All our memory is formed by more connections between different neurons. All cognitions improve as different wiring. There's more and more synapses formed between the neurons. And that's only going to happen if you're going to practice. The more you practice, the better, the more circuitry you develop. And that circuitry help you in dealing with day-to-day problems. Third is, you need to individualize the cognitive training. You have to, number one, see the person, their abilities, their specific cognitive dysfunction. You have to adjust it to the cognitive style of the individual. You have to personalize it, what does he like? There's no point telling people to do stuff they don't like. So whatever task you're giving, you should have a high interest value to the individual. And what you need to try is to make them as autonomous as possible. Give them autonomy. So try them to help to take responsibility for those things. Fourth principle is stress management. When the stress is less, you perform well. As it keeps going on and on and on, your capacity to deal with doing things get less and less. So you have to manage your stress when you're doing cognitive remediation. Fifth is motivation. You need to motivate the individual, and it's same principle. You should be personalizing, autonomy, using exercises that are engaging. Shouldn't be something you don't force people into doing stuff which is boring and they don't want to do it. So progressive, bottom-up, repetition practice, individualize, stress-free, and you work on motivation. Just to amuse yourself. And one very important thing, BDNF, they did a lot of work with schizophrenia, with cognitive deficits, and they found this chemical called BDNF in certain CRT exercises. But they also found that this improves with physical exercise and certain medication as well. So physical exercise could be helpful. Medication subtractions can help cognitions as well. So if you are having cognitive problems, you should always ask doctors about, question them about using sedative like benzodiazepine, Valium, Xanax, antihistamine medication. Certain mood stabilizer can interfere cognitions like topiramate. Generally, too much medication in general can affect your cognition. So I think the people should learn to question the doctors as well at times. I do a lot of teaching in medical school as well, and in the past, I would say 10 years, we have been focusing on this, that doctors should learn to talk with the patients. And the biggest thing I teach in psychiatry, like I do a lot of teaching in psychotherapy, and I teach them how to listen. So, they need to learn when they're sitting with somebody, either doing psychotherapy or assessing them, they need to sit and be quiet. Because it's not easy for a patient to come and start talking. He or she going to take time. Okay, cognitive adaptation, things like diaries, stopwatches, they all help. I'm not going to talk much about medication, but some of the medication has been used and studies done about all these antidepressants who have had impact on improving cognitive functions. If you want me to talk at some point, I can talk about it. I'm going to end by just take-home message. First message is plasticity. Brain has a remarkable plasticity. You need to trust your brain. Work it out. The more you're going to work it out, better you're going to get at it. Now there is so much evidence coming on that in your middle age, if you're going to practice more and more of your cognitive functions, that's going to prevent you from dementia, having old age memory difficulties and all those things. Cognitive deficits are all related to altered brain plasticity. And things like CRT or basic using cognition is, any activity that uses your cognition is going to improve it. It best work when it's progressive, repetitious, individualized, strategic, and there should be a motivational component. Deficit in brain plasticity may be set in very early, so early intervention is going to have a large positive implications and a greater impact on your cognitive functions. Thank you very much.
Thank you.